Is it serious? Is it just... I hope it's not too bad.
I've never had it, so I don't know how bad it is.
So you haven't been to a doctor or anything? It's just kind of sore, so you're just giving it a rest for a little bit to make sure it doesn't get worse?
Yeah, but I really I can't play. It hurts too bad, right?
That's definitely something you got to take care of. Yeah, I've heard of and spoken to many different gamers who've just messed their hands up playing because they've never taken care of it. And man, hands are important. I'll tell you that. I started getting, I was playing too many games on my phone and I started to get like a sore hand. And I immediately was like, okay, stop playing on my phone. Because that stuff is really, really rough, man. So I hope that does get itself sorted out. But for now, yeah, we can look at some replays. You did have a couple of questions, which is awesome. But yeah, I guess let's dive straight into a replay and then we can start talking about it. Were we going to try to cover other matchups, or was it all going to be just TvT versus Mech today?
I think, well, it's gonna be TvT mainly because I don't think we've gone through that at all. But it's not going to be only Mech. I've prepared one Mech game or two, and the rest is Bio. I mean, it depends on how much we can. Depends on how many of them we can go through.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, this should be great. Okay, cool. Well, let's hop in then. So you mentioned a few things. So how to hotkey your army was a question you listed. So what specifically do you mean by that? I mean, I'm trying to remember. Were you an F2 addict before, or what?
No,
what's
no.
the case?
I've had to start using F2 because the first thing I heard was that using F2 is the worst thing at all. So I immediately unbounded and never used it. But now I try to implement it because it is useful when I have lots of well, when the situation calls for it, right? It gets useful.
As long as it's used with discipline, right? That's one of those things. It's like great power, great responsibility. I would say it's similar to having, a heavy machine gun in the storage room in your house. Normally, you really should not need it, but if there is a zombie apocalypse, it's going to be friggin' amazing. And that's kind of the same with the F2 key. It's like, usually you don't need this. And it's obviously if you're addicted to just pulling this out every day and there's a cockroach or a rat in the corner of your kitchen and you're like, I need to get the machine gun, it's unnecessary and it's actually incredibly inefficient. And you're going to damage your house in the process of trying to kill the mouse running around your kitchen. It's just bad to have it as a bad habit, but that's totally fine to bring it back in. But so what do you mean about hotkeying your army? So are you thinking like what numbers everything goes on? Or are you thinking specifically, should I be boxing them at my rally point?
I'm thinking, how many control groups am I supposed to have for like a Biotank, Viking, Raven army, right? Because I used to have one for Bio, right? A Marine Marauder Medivacs, then I have one hotkey for my tanks, one for my Vikings, one for my Ravens. And moving my units around would take so much APM that I was struggling a lot, right? So I tried to get it, lower it, but it is it's difficult to get the right. Well, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's too complicated for sure. I mean, there's a reason. Like, I literally was playing a late game TvP the other day, and I was looking at this big fight, and I said, and because my Raven just flew in the front and died because I was stimming, spreading, and landing EMPs while sieging Widow Mines. And I looked at that and I said, oh man, if I landed an anti-armor missile, it would have been so good in this fight. And then I said, yeah, realistically though, when is that ever going to happen? And I said, look, the other things were more important. They were just way, way, way more important. Like, so much more important, you know? So I said to myself, well, I mean, how am I going to get better at using this Raven? Like, you know, yeah, maybe I'm not the best at it, but should I really be just saying, no, let's not use this? And then I said, yeah, that's actually right. I would rather control my bio properly than I would use that Raven. So I actually said, you know what? At this point in the game, my Raven should fly off and just go drop auto turrets in a mineral line. It's a great harassment unit. Could be a real pain in the ass, do big damage. So in general, I like to keep my army down to 2 control groups. My main army, as a general. I used to occasionally add a third one for like sometimes a Raven, sometimes ghosts. These days, the Raven will just go on my, you know, on my secondary army key or just be followed on my army, and I'll just manually control it, and my ghosts just go with my bio. I try to keep it as simple as possible these days, and it's made a big difference to me. So I think what you could do for me here is so write down your control groups in the document. So you see where you've written, so at the top of the document. So what are you normally doing on those? And then we can figure out exactly what we want to prioritize and deprioritize.
Only army hotkeys, right?
Yeah. Yep, just those is fine.
Okay.
Because your production is all on 5 and 6, so that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of Terrans have overly fancy TvT these days, and you know, I play against some players who are kind of mid-masters, sometimes high-masters, sometimes low-masters. And I'm always kind of making fun of how they play, because all they do is just like, they don't make Ravens, they just doom drop over and over again. Sometimes on one base, they never even take an expand, they just keep making Marines and tanks and dropping them in mineral lines and trying to siege them in the edge of your base. And it's actually such a good way to play if you aren't Innovation or Maru. You know, it's a way to play within your skill set. I play these guys and I always go, wow, this guy's playing like super YOLO, 1 or 2 base, just non-stop doom drop. Then I go, but that's actually what you should be doing. And then there's the 90% of players that aren't those 10% who are like, I'm going to make 4 Ravens every game in my opening. I want to make 3 command centers, 3 Cyclones, have the most technical opening of all time. And the thing is, there is something to be said for if you want to improve at that sort of TvT, but I do think people are far too technical, too defensive, and people aren't grabbing the matchup by the balls enough. And don't get me wrong, you can definitely get too eager and kill yourself. But I think just as bad as, like, I look at people who are playing defensive and there's just openings. There's so many openings where they could just be doom dropped to death or anything like that. So we want to try to make sure we're, you know, finding a way to play it well. So you've got your bio on 1. 2 is your early game Reaper, then tanks or mines. A small army of Hellions, it might be, as a little run by squad early on. Yep.
Yeah. The Ghost, Raven, and Leap hotkeys, they might change depending on which unit I have, which unit I use. But I try to use more of 1 army hotkey or maybe 2. So those are what I'm writing down is what it's thought out to be, and now I'm trying to change it around a bit.
Yeah, so I mean, here's what I kind of do in terms of how I number that. I guess I'll do it below just to make sure I don't mess up your list. So how do I think of it? And this is just, there's no right, there's no wrong way. We just got to figure out what works for us and make sure we're organized, right? Main army, secondary army, secondary army key. So this would be usually siege units or something like that, right? But early game, it's like the Raven and a couple of Vikings, right? Sometimes if you're just on pure bio medevac tank, you might put all your tanks on number 2 so you can quickly siege them, right? If you like that. There's different ways. So then 3 would be so that's 1 main army. I'm trying to think about it in terms of exactly what keys I use. Yeah, then I've got my drop/defense key. So my drop/defense key, obviously it's just use that for dropping my opponent. If I see a drop coming to me, I will split part of my army onto that key. If I've got a roaming squad of a medevac or 2, you know, just clearing up their Marines on the map, you know, just A moved around, 16 Marines, 2 medevacs, it'll go on that key. So that's a very flexible squad, but it's essentially, it's a separate small section of your army that is either, it's basically its job is counter-attacking or dealing with the enemy's counter-attacks, right? It's your dropping your opponent or defending their drops. So we've got main army, secondary army drop, and that is honestly 90% of what I use most of the time is those keys. And I try to keep it, you know, not too convoluted and not too complicated. So the thing that does happen, right, is you might be like, well, what if you have tanks and libs if you've taken air control, right? Well, those libs, I actually just end up just leaving them following my army. I literally right-click my libs on a siege tank. They're not even on a control group because I'm always going to be kind of manually sieging them up anyway. Is that the best way of doing it? Some would say no, some would say yes. I don't like them being on my Viking key because whenever I micro my Vikings, you know, the libs obviously have such shorter range. They just run too close and get killed by Marines. Yeah, what are your... So do we need a separate Ghost or Raven key, basically? For me, I'd be like, well, normally we're just using one of those. Like, so basically, Ghosts usually go with the main army. With most pro gamers these days. And this is something I used to not like doing. But I eventually swapped to it and I'm like, yeah, okay, it is. It just makes moving your army around a lot easier, like you'd mentioned. And you do get pretty quick at tabbing, right? It's also something where like you're using Ghosts mostly against Protoss, right?
Yeah.
And in that matchup, you actually want to be really careful with your stimming later on, because if you overstim, that's often how Terran players kill themselves in late game TvP, because there's a lot of the Protoss kind of pretending to engage and then just pulling back. And if you keep stimming, especially once you start building a lot of libs, your medevac count sucks. So you end up sometimes just putting your whole army deep in the orange, and you've got like 3 medevacs healing this gigantic bio army, and you're like, oh no. Like, and that actually is how a lot of players lose their games. So, yeah, for me, I would basically just say, what's the most important secondary army key? Is it the Ghosts, or is it the Libs, or the Ravens, or is it the tanks? For you, you've kind of got 3 separate army keys for that. I think it's nice. So I think a nice idea is X specialty unit key. Always right-click this on a tank to follow. So that the aim is basically, when you're moving around, you never want to be moving your army around with more than 2 control groups. You don't want to have to be like 1 right-click, 2 right-click, 3 right-click, 4 right-click, or 1 A-click, 2 A-click, 3 A-click, 4 A-click. At most 2 control groups, okay? So if you do use a specialty unit key where you're like, look, I really like having this Raven hotkeyed, I'll put that on hotkey 4. So it's just following your siege tanks, but when the fight happens, you can still select it and cast spells very easily. And this way, it's still, most of the time, you're just controlling 2 control groups, plus whatever your separate drop defense is. But we've got the specialty key available. What are your thoughts?
If I right-click my unit on a tank, I think I will have to get used to using my mouse more to micro. I mean, that sounds weird, but I mean like...
Sorry, if you wanted to get used to clicking what?
Control clicking my army, right? So to...
Well, which units are you thinking about control clicking in this scenario?
Liberators, for example, or a Raven.
Yeah. I mean how,
most of the time I have only 1 Raven.
How complicated do you want the army to be, though, right? Like, do we really want to be using tanks and Liberators separately? I don't know.
Should I only be using Liberators or tanks as a support unit?
I think whenever possible, it's always better to keep simplicity, but it really depends on our style. I mean, like looking at this game, and definitely if we decide to play the current way of playing Terran that people are copying from pros, which is I'm going to make 1 billion SCVs and take 10 bases and, you know, just play really, really slow. If we play that style, yeah, it's more definitely situations where we might want to use more units. But I mean, in that scenario, you'd probably just prioritize the Liberators on that specialty unit key, right? So you'd be like, okay, I'll have them as a specialty unit that I can still control. But I just don't think we should ever be thinking of there being more than 3 control groups in your army. Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of depends. Like, for me, I actually put the tanks with the bio because I feel like I very rarely need to, like, panic siege up, like, very quickly. But microing the Vikings and the Libs back and forwards ends up very important in late game TvT. So I think the important thing is to just have priorities. I think if you've got 4 control groups of units, chances are you're using 4 units, like control groups, badly, right? Just because you don't have enough mental APM for it. And if you've got to reposition, there's like too much going on. So I think the idea here is just to prioritize. It's not about, is this better? It's mental bandwidth as well as your ability to move around and use those units really well. Try to simplify things for yourself. So I think honestly it's like, you know, like I said with the specialty unit key, that's kind of your third thing. So let's use a very specific scenario. I guess we can look at this game. Let's go back a few minutes in this game. Let's find an army and let's talk about it. So our army's not control grouped at this point, but let's take it. It's not. No, and then we just... Okay, this one was just to grab the whole army and throw it on one key.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, never mind. Let's go to an earlier fight. When we're a bit more organized.
I might have not control grouped it separately at all.
Yeah.
Because I told you I tried to switch it to one control group and get used to it, or less.
Yeah.
I think I get my tanks on a separate one sometimes.
I think stick to the same thing that you're used to. You know, I really don't like if you're used to using 2 control groups, I do like the tanks being on a separate control group. I think it is quite nice. Definitely you can use everything just on one big control group, but yeah, really does depend. Oh my. So, your opponent has really shit missile turret placement, by the way. So this is really common until you get to high level, where people build like 27 missile turrets in the most obvious drop area, and they don't even cover the edge of the map. Like if you go down the very right, or the very bottom of this map, you can get in without losing a single medevac. This is so common. People build like 37 turrets in the middle of their base, and then like, that's the most defended area. That's where the Vikings are anyway, is the middle. So it does my head in that people are too silly to actually deal with that. Sorry, just one. Oh, damn. We just got a raid from Creighton. Thank you so much, Creighton. Just finished casting EU, I think. Much love, brother. Really appreciate that. Yeah. So, I mean, can you just use it that way? Yeah. If you're playing more mobility style as well, it's even better to just use what you're doing here, practicing control clicking. Because if you're using mostly biotank, you can't really push through the because they'll have the air advantage, right? So if you're playing simpler armies, it's more about, oh, but then I send another army down this left-hand side and like siege up some tanks and marines there, and then I send some drops in. So in those scenarios, you just want chunks of army, right? Thank you very much, Kybex, for the raid as well. Sorry, turning those sound effects off. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it comes down to the style you're playing a little bit as well. So if you're playing technical Viking, Lib, Siege Tank, I am actually down with you using 3 control groups, right, for that army, because it's so technical and so methodical in how you move forward. But if you're running around with like big bio armies, right, often it's like, oh, I've just got to box and spread out and do a big stim and come in from 2 angles and clear this army. Or playing against the Zerg, I'm spreading out. Against Protoss, I'm spreading out against splash damage, right? So I think it kind of comes down to which style you're playing a little bit in terms of what we prefer. That being said, does that mean, okay, based on what I'm doing in the game, I'll change the way I use my hotkeys? Fuck no, that's stupid. That's too complicated, right? If we change every game, I'll swap to this hotkey method and then that hotkey method another game, that's like, it's just going to cross the wires in your brain. So I think it comes down to what you want to work on. Do we want to work on simpler armies with more mobility and more positioning? Or do we want to work on more kind of technical micro armies, like really using those tank lib Viking mechanics, using ghost lib Viking against Protoss, those armies, I'm all down with the 3-4 control groups in the army. So yeah, what are you thinking?
I think it's nice if I have a different style for each matchup, so I can practice it or practice those. Versus Zerg, I'm playing a fast third command center into a 1-1 tank push. So I think that's more the positioning side of things. Versus Toss, I'm doing an all-in. So I guess that's also kind of keeping it simpler. So maybe I should try to play a more technical style.
In TvT or against?
Yes, in TvT.
All right, yeah. I mean, if you want to, that can be good. Definitely. I mean, it's definitely, of course, all about are we going to find something that works for us in the long run and that feels good is still always the best thing. Because it's more about, do you reinforce your practice than is this the perfect thing to do, right? It's when I fuck up, am I motivated and focused on, oh, let's just do it better next time and fix the mistake, right? But if you're every game going, I think it was my hotkeys, it's not even necessarily that your hotkeys were bad, it's that you're blaming your hotkeys because you don't feel as confident with them and you feel like they're slowing you down. And that's going to cause you to play worse and not, improve as quickly. Yeah. So I guess we can go past this question and maybe come back to it and touch on it a bit, but at least we've talked about the theory a bit there, right? So I think you can kind of make your decisions on that.
Yes.
So in terms of TvT, big question, how to play against Mech. But you also mentioned wait a second, like let's get an idea of, should you play a different opening? What is the point of this build? You kind of wanted to understand your opening a bit better and see if you should learn a new opening. So you're doing a very aggressive Reaper Hellion YOLO. This is very popular thanks to Cure beating Inno. It was already around. I was very disparaging towards this style for a little bit. I was like, wow, what is this fucking NA ladder special? It's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's a good build. It's a great build for killing people. It's very, Hellion drop is always a dangerous thing. Non-stop reproduction is as well. But it is obviously very committed. So this is a very aggressive opening. So that's totally fine. Obviously, like your command center is mega late. Like that's going down at past 700 minerals, which is quite poor.
Yeah.
You also don't follow it up with like a lib at all. I guess it's very personal. I do like the lib to follow it up because I feel like a lot of the time you end up killing the Cyclone or something. And Ravens aren't very good at killing libs. Now, of course, you're playing a guy who's just going straight into Vikings. So remember what I was talking about, how there are players out there who I actually admire, even though they're technically not playing good TvT. They're not playing the highest level. Because, guess what? They're not building Ravens. This is one of those players. This guy says, I'm just going to make tanks and Vikings. These units are very simple to use. They're very obvious to use. There's nothing fancy about them, right? It's like literally the most generic Mech 101. It's like, I'll make Vikings to shoot the air and I'll siege tanks on the ground. That's actually a powerful way to play because it's simple as fuck. If he's not watching his army, it's going to perform. So against this, Liberator's not as good. But if they, that Cyclone went down, your opponent was building Ravens and a Lib came in now, he'd be in big trouble, right? So that is why the Lib follow-up can be really nice to this. As it is, though, you've done a super aggressive opening, and then you're basically just going into a CC, third CC, Ravens. Now, I want to ask you, why are we building 2 Cyclones? What's that for?
In case he's moving out.
Yeah. Do you ever actually kill anything with it, though?
With the Cyclone?
Yeah.
Not using this build. I've done a fast expand, and then I got the battle cruiser with the Cyclones and a Raven.
Because I feel like the Cyclones are really good if you micro like a god. But I think a lot of people do this with the 2 Cyclones, and the opponent moves out, and you're not watching, and both your Cyclones die. And you go, that was really expensive. So that's the problem with these Cyclones, is they're really good if you're out there picking off units. And they should be out there right now, which they aren't. They could pick off this siege tank that has walked down the ramp for no reason. And this third base, which is built on location, like an absolute fucking psychopath. This is Mech Player 101. Opponents attacked into me really hard. Cool, I'm gonna build CCs on location and just like defend with one siege tank, because why not? So your Cyclones needed to be over there, making sure this third didn't get built, and seeing if an attack moved out, because you don't have any siege tanks. So if he pushed you with his Vikings and tanks, what can you defend with right now? Your Ravens are worth nothing, because he has the air advantage, and you've got 1 tank versus 4 tanks. You would just die to a counterattack, and especially after your early aggression, you know, even though you killed a few SCVs, you only got about 5. You should have been very worried about that. And yet you're not building tanks for a long time here. So this is very dangerous here as a follow-up. It's also one where, like I said, the Cyclones are very good for defending counterattacks if we micro like a god. So you've got to be aware of that as you're opening, right? So opening, very aggressive. Let's go right back to the start with your attack as well. So obviously you need to do damage. CC needs to go down immediately on 400 minerals. Shout out to you. You, like most Terran players, by the way, I don't think you ever lower this other depot for a very long time, which this is my trigger point. Everyone has been watching the backseat as me just telling Maynard to lower this depot repeatedly and him refusing to. I don't know. It just makes moving around your base more awkward. It's bad if you get surprised by a drop. Okay, so this was really bad, your attack. Your whole build is focused on my expansion's late, therefore I need to get that down straight away when we can, right? But it was really late. So you got to remember to move that SCV down. Number 2, you're building everything towards this one big attack and you run up the ramp where there's about a 50% chance he's standing there with his units, right? Without your Hellions being ready. So you let him kill a Reaper before the fight started. And then your Hellions are unloading in the middle of the battle. So this should have been you unloading and jumping up there with everything at once, right?
Okay.
Unless 90% of your games, people are sitting up in the main base or right in the back of the natural. But I think a lot of the time people will try to hold the high ground. And you could have taken a much better fight and then ran in and killed way more units here, and it would have been amazing. Yeah, I think that's just got to be something where it's like, it's so important that this attack does stuff because you've spent so much time building towards it. In the very early game, you are building Reapers and Allies. Do you SCV Scout? You don't, right?
No, because it is so aggressive, the build. Normally I would...
Do you ever attack with 2 Reapers and a Hellion? Or do you always wait?
I've always waited until now, but I was thinking about moving out because I might stop his fast expansion. Maybe even move out with 1 Reaper, but I'm not feeling confident enough to keep building my units while I do that.
I mean, if you kill even 1 unit though, like if you fight right now when you've got 2 Hellions, 3 Reapers, you just win the game. Look what has he got right now? So I'm okay with you not attacking, but you should be sitting on this high ground. Because with this opening, you should be winning maybe half, maybe 25% of your games should be over in the first 6 minutes. Or you should have a massive advantage, right? That's the nature of this. This is a really aggressive attack. So we want to make sure that we understand that that is what we're doing as a player. And it is a good build. I really like this build. Obviously, it's not as good for practicing the later stages because you'll just win a bunch of your games. But just to understand it, sit on the high ground and ambush and immediately counterattack, you know? If you kill any units, get over there. And then you could run over, you could maybe kill his command center, kill this Cyclone on its own. He's got nothing else building behind this. It's 2 Reapers, a Hellion, a Cyclone, nothing else. So this should have been game over when he runs up this ramp, but your 2 Hellions and Reaper, for some reason, were sitting up in your main base. And you also did this weird thing here, where when your medevac comes out, you pick up and then you drop and then you pick up and then you drop. Why? Why don't we just run across the map on the ground? Why are we picking up?
Because I wanted to pick up the Hellions and let the Reapers run, but I accidentally loaded in the Reapers.
But why do we do that? Why don't we just have the Hellions on the ground?
Actually, the guy who recommended me this build told me to only load up the Hellions, so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Let's try and use our own brain rather than thinking like whatever. It's good for the Hellion dropping in the main, but the Hellions are actually faster. So if anything, it should be the Reapers in the medevac to boost across, to keep in line with the Hellions, just to get across the map faster. But you should just keep everything on the ground. There's no reason for these to be in the medevac. This attack is all about timing and hitting as fast and hard as possible, and we've given up so much opportunity here. If you're doing a one-base timing attack, which is what you're doing, this is a one-base attack. Is it all in? No. But it fucking better do some damage, especially if your opponent went even like a fast expand. This guy's expand was like a medium expand, 2 minutes 20, delayed starport build. But this is just something where you got to look at this and go, what's the point of this build? Generic terms, fundamentals. You're doing a one-base attack. You should always be putting a bunch of critical thinking into making sure that attack hits as hard and fast as possible. So these are very important things. Make sure the attack hits hard. Realize that because our economy is so slow, speeding up that command center is so important, making sure that goes down at a decent time. Behind it, 2 cyclones equals mega tryhard micro god units. Really good, don't get me wrong, really good if you control well, but not as reliable as tanks. Pig recommends just 1 cyclone and more tank production. Especially if your first attack doesn't do big damage, you need non-stop tank production just to survive. And the thing is, that's like a general rule of solid TvT. The higher level the players you play in TvT, the less powering there is in the early game, right? So there's less moments where they say, I'm going to take a gap in my production here and just build a quicker third CC. I'll build quicker eBays. The way the top Terran players play safe is they just, and also economically, is they just keep building tanks, Ravens, Vikings, Marines, these units non-stop to make sure they can go fuck their opponent up and also survive their opponent's attacks. So it's all just about non-stop production of these early technical units. And that's what I wanted to bring up here with, remember this, you went double cyclone, which was nice. It's a good stopgap. The Ravens are great. Going so many Ravens is always, it can be good, but they are a very fragile unit. And then just having that tank production was definitely a big iffy. So I think this opening is totally fine if you want to stick with it. What are you thinking? Do you want to stick with this opening or change it up?
I think I've not played it too much. I think only 10 games. Well, not counting the ones against AI. I think I enjoy a fast expand more. I am not a big fan of doing a all-in or something to or let's say using a strategy that if my opponent knew I would do it would be almost useless, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any strategy that's like that, though. I mean, the thing is, your opponent, at best, has to just react really well with, like, a bunker and all sorts of stuff, and then, even if they know it's coming, we see people still take massive damage if their defense isn't perfect. So, I understand the mindset there. The thing is, everyone sucks at scouting, and even when people react, this is actually quite solid in this matchup right now because it is so flexible. So if you get good enough at executing the attack, people can deal with it. If you were to swap to a more expansion focused build, obviously we would just, slow down the starport. We'd probably do 2 Reaper Hellion or 3 Reaper 2 Hellion with a quicker command center, then the starport, and kind of go to the next step on the low ground. But I mean, it just comes down to like, we don't need to change this build order. Since you've already got the opening down, you can just get better at it. It just comes down to how you enjoy playing the game. I mean, do you want to be more aggressive? Do you want to really try to just do a gas first expand? Do we want to do an old school barracks? Like, there's 1,000 ways we can play, and there's so many ins and outs. So I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, let's teach you a new way of playing. I don't think there's any reason to change the opening unless you're like, yeah, I really don't like this opening. It's shit. I hate it. Like, so what do you want to do as a player?
I used to get really frustrated when my opponent was doing a very aggressive strategy, and I would defend it only decently and then be behind because of it. So I'm not sure. I think I enjoy playing defensive more, but I will have to get better at it too.
I mean, you're still
salty.
you're still playing defensive after the opening with this build
Yeah.
anyway, right? It's still just standard TvT after that, so that's why I'm like, whatever. Like, why don't we just stick with this and get better at this opening and stuff? So I guess from here then, let's stick with this opening, and yeah, don't be a salty shitlord. You know, if you watch my stream, it's easy to. Also, I've been way too salty lately, and you know, it's just you're looking at the game wrong. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes your opponent plays bad, and it's fine to judge their strategies, and well, it's fine to understand and evaluate. Judgment doesn't really get us anywhere. This is good, this is bad. You know, these words are just so useless. It's like every time someone in my chat is like, oh, is X good? Is X bad? Is this strategy or this strategy better? It's like the most useless way to think about StarCraft. It's a strategy game. It's like, wow, this is better in this scenario. This has this strength, these weaknesses. StarCraft, right? You know? You've got to evaluate. There's no point judging things on good or bad because it's completely mindless. All it is it's this innate... It's like we're monkeys. We're going, I'm the alpha. I'm the alpha monkey. My strategy is the better one. You know, it's like we're fighting for some sort of status. No one gives a fuck about status. Your MMR doesn't care about status. All your MMR cares about is, are you playing a strategy in a way that makes sense, in a cohesive way? So I think it's important to just kind of, set your mindset and go, okay, this guy's doing a bit of a dumb strategy. It's weak because of X. You know, the moment you find yourself judging, try to transform it into, this is why it's bad. Now it's my job to fucking show that it's bad, right? I played a guy who made like 47 Ravages yesterday against me, and I was playing with latency, and I was like, fuck, it's so hard to dodge this many corrosive biles with my Archons and Immortals. And I was definitely playing worse because I was getting a little worked up. But at the same time, I was like, I'm going to micro my fucking heart out. I'm not going to lose to this. And there's like a weird thing where everyone has their own way of getting through those moments of the ego trying to grab control. Sometimes you roll with it, sometimes you don't. Hopefully you can just get better with it. But I think for now, let's talk a bit about how to play against Mech and your follow-up. Because you definitely didn't really look like you had a clear goal of what you were doing here.
No,
in terms
I have
of...
no idea what I'm doing after the opening.
Oh, in general? Or just against Mech?
Well, in general in TvT. I normally go command center, then 2 engineering base, then I go 2 barracks, 2 gas, 2 barracks, and then I'm kind of just adding more factory, starport, and 2 barracks. But it's just getting a lot of marines and units out.
Yeah. Little tip, by the way, if you're ever worried about a counterattack with this bunker you built, in TvT I like to put it as far out as possible. You see where I'm signaling?
As far out as possible. Yes.
Yeah, because siege tanks, right? Because all it's going to do is buy time. That's all a bunker does in TvT. So I would rather force them to siege further away so they don't have control of my ramp. Because otherwise, when this bunker falls, they basically control your ramp and you can't get in and out of your base, and it gets really awkward. If you don't have Viking control, you basically are dead at that point, right? You have to pull your SCVs into it, and if you don't get rid of it quickly, you're just going to die. So if I'm ever buying time with a bunker, I build it way out front. And if I know I just need to buy time, I know I've done crazy economic damage, but I've got very few units, I will build another bunker behind it. So that when that one dies, I've got another bunker I can mass repair to buy time. And that way you kind of force them to very slowly leapfrog. You buy yourself about 2 minutes with 2 bunkers sometimes. So just a cute little thing for TvT specifically. In the other matchups, you would never build a bunker out there in TvT, where siege tanks and ravens are everything. Absolutely. Okay, so you go 3rd CC double eBay normally. Well, guess what? You went 2 barracks this time. So that's number 1. Write down your transition, your normal transition. So let's get that written down right now. So we've got your opening notes there. I guess down the bottom there, we can say, okay, transition from opening. So what, 3rd CC? Now I like the 2nd and 3rd barracks first.
Okay.
So I guess we can keep that as standard if you want. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you always do it in the same order. That's all I care about here. Whether it's eBays or barracks first, it's really just as long as you do it in the same order every game, I'm happy. So it's 2nd and 3rd racks, double eBay, and then double gases on this natural after the eBays start by the looks of it. 3rd and 4th gases on the natural. And then you've gone 4th and 5th racks, okay? Cool. Now, what's next? What should be next in your production here? Standard game. You're playing against Bio.
I have no idea.
So, choose. Imagine you're in game right now. We go in 4th CC, 8 more barracks, 5 more factories, 12 starports, 5 command centers. What are we doing?
Well, I should get an armory.
Yep, obviously armory for 2-2, yep. But production-wise or economy-wise, what next?
Well, it would just be a guess. I would...
Well, what do you want to focus on as your standard as a player, right? This is a very simple question. Do you want more Marines or more tanks? Or do you want to swap into air very early? And this is standard bio versus bio.
Normally, I go for more Marines.
Okay. So would you get like 2 more barracks, 3 more barracks with reactors? What?
2 more.
Okay, awesome. I like that. All right, so we go 6th and 7th racks. Now this is all off 1 factory, so it's pretty low with the factory count. Some people like to play 1 factory all game and even go straight to air off it. It does mean if you mess up a fight and lose all your tanks though, you really struggle, right? So the 2nd factory gives you more safety, more ability to bounce back, but it does impinge your mobility a little bit. So I would say the standard thing is to get a 2nd factory here as well. 6th, 7th rack, 2nd factory, and then eventually we can go up to more things. Now, before all this though, if we do want to play the super economic game, which it looks like we are with this build, we might want to squeeze a 4th command center in before those last 2 barracks. Because we can, just to keep our expansion rate going up, a lot of people like to build a quick 4th CC. So they like to slide that in, and this is the current meta way. We can change this. I think it's totally fine to get the barracks up, the extra factory, and then go for the 4th command center. But a lot of people are taking very quick 4ths. Gives you a lot of money. Gives you a lot of money to work with. So let's say 4th CC before the 6th and 7th barracks and the 2nd factory. With that army, you can play bio medevac tank all game long, right? You don't need any more production than that. Obviously, technically, there's like a, extra starport on a reactor. There's a transition at some point later for air control, but I wouldn't focus on it. I would say 90% of the time it's, what you do with the Marine tank that's gonna decide the game. So that's cool. We've got a path now. Okay, that's really important because in this game you went 2nd starport, but we didn't know it was Mech. We knew we were playing a strange player. So now let's talk a little bit about the Mech. So which style did you enjoy? I gave you that video. You get a chance to watch the whole game?
Yeah, I watched the whole game.
So that was obviously a technical air style, which Keller Zur used against Terra Marine. That one or ground style? Yeah.
Would the air style work if if your Marine built like 1,000,000 turrets like my opponent did?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can just push through turrets with tanks. And the thing is, anytime they take a new base, that base doesn't have turrets at it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, like as soon as he goes out to take a new base, all those turrets are worth nothing. Yeah. And it's just as much about killing his army when he pushes you, right? Which turrets aren't with the army. So, yeah, absolutely. So with that style, you're keen to do that air swap then, or?
You were talking about that you said you would go for some kind of mass drop Marine style.
Yeah, basically Zerg them. You just play Zerg.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can play Zerg against them, where you just take once you realize it's Mech, you just build a 4th command center on location, and you will keep expanding on location at a quicker than normal rate. So, just to give you some details of that style, I guess I'll write it out. So basically, if we play the mass ground style, which I do really enjoy, just because it's very fun, very mobile. So mass ground, some of the details of that style, and really what makes this work is it's about
Nothing left in that mineral cluster.
just mass racks, right? So basically, you'll want to add more tech labs, of course, right? Get a few more marauders in the mix. Marines are still very valuable. If they have a lot of Hellions, especially, you need Marines to kill them. People are like, oh, aren't Hellions good versus Marines? They are, but Marauders can't kill Hellbats is the problem. If you ever seen a Marauder try to kill a Hellbat, it's like, it'll kill it eventually. The problem is there's tanks behind the Hellbats, right? So you kind of need Marines in there as well. Marines also deal with Vikings, Ravens. Marines are just a very high damage unit. They also, as fragile and little as they are, they don't take the bonus damage from the siege tanks. So Marauders do get wrecked by tanks as well. So Marines are the best. I mean, you get 4 Marauders in a mineral line with a drop, they'll kill some stuff. You get 8 Marines in a mineral line. Goodbye mineral line, right? They're just much higher damage units. So mass racks, more tech labs than normal. So normally you go 1 tech lab for reactors, right? So I would probably go 2 tech labs, 3 reactors, like 2 tech labs, 3 reactors, and then I'd probably go up to like 4 tech labs, 3 reactors or something like that. Like I'd keep mixing it up basically. 4th CC on location ASAP. Single dropship of Marauder Marine on your flank, guarding against Hellion run-bys. A lot of people just die to Hellion run-bys when they're playing against Mech. Their whole army is like, yeah, I'm out here with my army. Always have a single drop of, you know, a few Marauders and Marines and a medevac just running around on the flank, ready to deal with Hellion run-bys. Sometimes, if they're doing lots of Hellion run-bys, two medevacs. Keep massing racks up to 12 to 14 racks, and keep expanding as well, basically. So pure medevac production, no Vikings, right? So you got to be careful to not just sit there, you know, next to their tanks and have the Vikings pick off your medevacs. Yeah, usually the goal. So the notes on really how to make it work, and this is the important stuff, is that dropship guarding against run-bys. But basically get your drops going as soon as possible. You know, in the mid game, always be threatening with one half your army and doom dropping the other half in the back, essentially. And obviously, sometimes you rotate and come back all together and collapse on a new exposed expansion, right? So if you keep attacking everywhere, they're putting turrets everywhere and all this sort of stuff. Like, we can go back in this game a few minutes and we can look at this, for example. You can go, okay, cool. Like I pointed out earlier, drop pods. This would be the easiest win of your life because this guy just doesn't know how to place his missile turrets, which is amazing because it's what his entire strategy is based upon. I can tell he watches a Villo stream. So yeah, I don't know. Basically, even if you get their Vikings, say they end up with 6 Vikings down the bottom, they got all these tanks spread across each base. Suddenly they move out to take this base, and they've only got 5 or 7 tanks guarding it. And suddenly you're like, oh, I actually am not doom dropping now. I've like broken these rocks down, and I'm gonna collapse in from 3 sides on that base and just kill those tanks, kill that expansion, and then pull back. And then suddenly they're like, oh shit, I gotta fear the frontal attack again. And then another doom drop hits them in the back. So there's a rotation of kind of what you're going for. But what's very important is not letting them get past a certain size. Having a clean enough opening and then not letting them get past a certain size. So what do I mean by that? I mean, a lot of mech players basically just hope that you let them get to where they want to get to. They do not earn that spot in the game. Now, remember I talked about this earlier. What the fuck is he doing with that 3rd CC on location? If you sent your Cyclone over here, you would have killed that. And even for a few minutes after that goes up, if we went straight into bio medevacs, what's he got to defend it? So there's something as well to be said for building less Ravens in general. Ravens are really good for, obviously, you can take a few tanks out, go in there. But realistically, if I knew I was playing someone who's going to play mech before the game started, I would just go straight medevacs from the very beginning. Unless I really committed to like winning the first Viking fight, at which point I would after that swap to medevac production, because all I want to do is just drop. Because I know that like they should not be able to get a 3rd very early. If they do something like this, front is weak, 3rd is weak. The only well-defended angle is where those Vikings are. Back of the natural's weak. There's so many areas here that are exposed. And getting in there is usually very important. But what often happens is if we let them secure their 3rd, for instance, and this guy's just got one of the silliest build-ups I've ever seen. So the scary thing with a mech player is their second and third factory getting up with tech labs. Usually the first one's on a reactor for quite a while. And then building, suddenly there's 2 tanks, then 4, then 6, right? There's like a exponential power. Now your opponent here is spending all of his minerals on turrets and never getting his factories up. So he's giving you a gigantic window, right? You know, sometimes you got to smash the window in and find the weakness against a mech player. This guy has opened the window for you. Like, you can just climb in and just go, oh, okay, cool. Because he's just got no tank production. What have we got? 5 tanks. You could stim in the front and just A-move your way to victory, right? If you had enough bio. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, this opening was you know, a bit different from us. We're focusing more on Ravens and tanks ourselves. But that's kind of the whole path there, is don't just let them get 3 and 4 bases up for free. Start doing these doom drops, stim bio, more stim bio, more stim bio. And your units are quite expendable. So you don't really mind too much if you lose a few of those units. You know, you can take a bad drop here or there. But for every bad drop, you'll get 8 Marines in an undefended mineral line, kill 15 SCVs, snipe an armory, and, you know, it's very hard for them to deal with it whenever you catch them out of position.
Add-on complete.
So that's the mass bio version. What's the late game for that? If it goes late enough, and you're like, cool, I have 10 expansions or 8 expansions, but they're on 4 bases now, shit, and it's really hard to fight their army. Obviously, set up giant surrounds to ambush them when they move out. So what you do is you have your army kind of split up in big blobs. And like in this game, for instance, so you always know they're going to do a big tank push. We know he's going to push this way, right? Or this way. So you just have a big blob of army sitting there, big blob of army sitting here. Half your bio on both key. And you do this whenever you're behind in the matchup. That's what you do as standard, is you just say, I'm going to set my army up in these 2 big halves. Keep a few spotting units. When I see him move out, I'm going to set up, and we're just going to jump on it. And you will often catch him sieging a bit late, or with only a few tanks sieged up. And you will ruin the mech army. If they don't get their tank sieged up properly, they will just die. So in this game, check it. You could have easily been maxed with bio spread out, but instead you have no map vision. So you don't even know he's moving out. But imagine if we were chilling with bio like that. What is this army? He's got 9 tanks and a Viking, and a few more tanks and Thors down the bottom as well. No vision in front of his army. Yeah, he's got sensor towers in front of it, but he doesn't know where your army is. You could be just outside of sensor tower range, right? And he's just like, yeah, I'll just A-move. You could kill this with a way smaller army than his if you jumped on it, right? And this opportunity here that we're looking at presents itself so many times when you're playing a mech player. That's what you look for. It's the same thing a Zerg player looks for, you know? When you're playing a Zerg who's way behind and you're like push out and you're like, this guy's so fucking dead. But then for some reason he's on your side of the map and like the Banelings get your Marines in a big ball and you're like, oh, fuck off. Like, this guy was just waiting for me to move out and I was still macroing and not looking at my army and I lost all my Marines and now he's back in the game. You want to do the same thing against Mech. Just remember, you are a Zerg player. You are all about the mobility, all about catching them on siege, jumping on them. Don't let them just move across the map and siege up. If you let them do what he's done here, you fucked up real bad, right? Means you got a base trade, which obviously you're trying to do now, very late, and into the worst angle. If you're ever forced to do a desperate counterattack like that, by the way, a lot of us go and attack the edges. It's almost always the wrong idea. You always want to go straight to the natural and into the main. If you ever are forced to just backstab with a big stack of bio, you stem right up the ramp towards the natural and into the main, and you go for the production. Cut the production off, you cut off the head of the mech snake. That's where you win it. So that makes a big diff. And then if it gets late enough, you mass nukes. And you want to use the very edge of the splash range to easily outrange siege tanks, right? Have you ever seen me play against a Villo with that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'll link you a video. There's a few. Nuking a Villo, I'm sure one of them's called. Yeah. There's so many. I mean, this one is from there's a 2018 game. I've linked that for you. I'll link it in chat as well. It was actually Riddler who I first discovered the nukes against, because he was playing really, and obviously that's the guy who pretends to be a Villo. He was playing mega turtly, and I remember I just realized, like, wait, he would try to mass Ravens in the you remember when they did damage, the anti-armor missiles? You know, when you could just spam them to kill things.
Yeah.
So he would just mass ravens, and I was like, oh, this is dumb. Like, if you've played mass raven TvT at that time, it was a special kind of stupid.
I played it a week ago.
Oh, you went back on the old patch?
No, he that guy just, it was a 1 hour game. He was turtling and he built like 10 ravens and went in with
Just
mass turrets.
just turret spam.
Yeah.
That's
but
also
it was
quite
so
silly.
annoying.
Yeah. The anti-armor missiles were even stupider, right? Because you'd both just like spam them and run away and spam them and spread against each other and stuff. And they did so little damage, but they just shot so fast that, you know, you'd just get this stack of ravens. And I remember being like, okay, I would have my own stack of ravens to counter his ravens. Not as many, just a small number to punish him when he came in. And I would just queue up I'd just non-stop nukes, 10 Ghost Academies pumping, and I would just queue nukes on all of his bases. And you just, if he's sieged with these tanks here, you just place the nuke maybe a stalker range in front of the siege tanks. It won't necessarily kill them, but it'll get them very low. The second nuke will kill them, and it'll pressure them, and if their army moves into it, they get ruined. Avillo, because I've done it to him so many times now, is actually really good at running forward with his ravens, and he keeps interference matrixing the ghosts. And I'm like, oh shit, he's actually defending 3 nukes at a time, continually. I'm like, this is really good. Because he's got so much practice with it, but most people will just fall apart. So nuking, like I said, you've got this ability to come in from multiple sides and ambush their army, right? And it makes it very hard for them to kill you. So a lot of people go, he's maxed on tanks, I can't win. But like I said, if you're out there on the map, you've got your spotting units out, you're ready to just stim and come from 2 sides, you can often kill those tanks, and they're so bad, right? So even when you're not able to fight his army, you can almost always slow him moving across the map a huge amount of time just by threatening that, looking for that engagement, and then you can start nuking their army, nuking their bases, and that's another way. So in terms of what style appeals to you as a player, are you thinking you're going to go for that zerging overwhelming style, or are you going to go for the air control style?
I think the zerging style sounds a lot more fun.
I think they're both very fun, but yeah, it is definitely a more map control focused, and it is something about having 2 big blobs of bio out on the map that are good. Just remember, you'll have games where they get away with being greedy and getting that third up. Your opening's not tight enough. They defend your early pressure. And you will feel a little bit like you're attacking into a hard wall. And you will need to get very good at setting up those flanks and very good at getting into the nukes and stuff like that in those games where you're behind. But as you get better and better at it, you'll have less and less games like that because you'll be better at doing damage early and not letting them get up a third for free and all that sort of stuff. So just remember, it's a very engagement focused thing. Sometimes you'll just get absolutely stomped in the fight if they get their tank sieged up well and stuff. And other times you'll get there out engaged and you go, oh, that was beautiful. I destroyed this super technical mech army with just Marines and Marauders. That's awesome. So it's very seesawy in that result. Okay, I think that's really cool. You've got the double drop plan, keep expanding and stuff, keep sending those drops in, and always look for the very edges of the map, right? Always look for, not only because people like this guy don't know where to build their missile turrets. I'm going to keep shitting on this guy because I just get so triggered by it. Even look at this base up here. He's got 8 turrets around it and nothing on the edge of the map to stop drops getting in. You could literally drop a bunch of Marines and Marauders behind the mineral line without getting hit by a turret. It's insane. It's number 1 priority when you're building cannons, turrets, spores is zone the edge of the goddamn map. Whenever the map is nice enough to give you the edge of the map right there with no dead space, it's oh, sweet. I will build 2 turrets or 2 spores right there to make sure drops can't get past. But, yeah. Okay, awesome, man. So final questions here as we start to wrap up. I think we are pretty much out of time.
Do I ever get liberators to spend my gas?
Ooh, they're good harassment. So I like libs as harassment, but I kind of feel like you're so busy with drops anyway that usually you won't bother. But if you somehow all your drops keep surviving, maybe you've got too many medevacs. Yeah, I think libs for harassment would be good. Or, part of me says, well, what if all the Vikings die? You create enough movement that the Vikings keep running ahead of the army and getting killed by Marines, right? That's a really good thing that happens with this, right? Is, anytime you clear the army, anytime you clear the Vikings, because they go into Marines. What can we do? Well, libs on army is great, but we don't really want to swap into that. You'll have more Vikings by then. Just drop on the tanks is usually the more important thing, right? Just pick up a medevac and go do some Marine bombs on top of their siege tanks is a nice way to take advantage of that. Yeah, I think libs for harassment is okay if we have too many medevacs. If we have too many medevacs, libs for harassment can be awesome. You just got to micro them quite well because mech players build a lot of turrets, so you got to make sure you don't queue it to siege on top of a missile turret. That's all. Cool. I'm just looking through the notes and kind of reviewing it, and I'm just kind of racking my brain, seeing if there's anything I haven't thought of. I do think, yeah, I mean, you'll get a good idea of the kind of nukes and stuff from that VOD, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other VODs if you just search nukes on my channel of different late game. I would say in general, though, a lot of those ones are where I've let it get further in the game than I probably should have, right? So just keep in mind, you probably shouldn't be letting it get there. That's more of a, if I have to. Don't be aiming to play mass nukes by default. Yeah. Cool. Anything else popping into your head?
Well, I have a billion questions, but I think I can think of the solutions myself.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, write them all down and stuff. And I mean, just a final point. Really do take care of your wrists and your hands. Because I've had too many people, a few of my older students as well. I had one, and she was like, "Oh, I actually can't play StarCraft anymore. Like my hand is just too fucked, so I can never really play again." And I was like, "No." So take care of it now, earlier rather than later. Yeah, I mean, I dislocated my shoulder and couldn't do any climbing or proper upper body exercise like a year and a half ago, and I was like, oh, if this was permanent, I'd be so upset. Let alone if something happened to my hands, I'd just lose my shit. So like the moment, and I'm very lucky, but yeah, stretch, look at the way you're using your mouse, try to make sure you're not too tense while you play. Look up some day 9 videos, go see your doctor or your physiotherapist, give it a break for a few weeks before you play. Take care of that shit, and please don't let your hands get hurt, man. I hope it heals up real quick.
Thanks.
All right, mate. Well, yeah, good stuff. Let me know how it goes. And yeah, shoot me a message in chat or whatever if you've got any follow-up questions with specifics on this, because I think it's a fascinating style, but it's also not really how we play Terran that much. For me, it's natural, you know. I've got a little bit of experience as a Zerg player trying to break mech armies, so it's kind of taking a skill set that I already had and building upon it. It's the same as attacking with Roach Hydra into tanks, you know. So you might need to learn a few fundamental things. But yeah, keep being critical, and good luck, mate.
Thanks.
All right, I'll catch you next time. Laters. Thank you very much, everybody, for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys did enjoy today's coaching session. So obviously, we're talking a bit about the opening and stuff, and it wasn't that his opening was bad. We talked a bit about control group options. So there's a lot of theory without me clearly dictating here is an actionable point that you must put into place right now, which I think is obviously totally fine. But yeah, a bit about hotkeys, bit about all that stuff. And I think this is... I think this is all very useful stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I do want to say a big thanks to everyone who's been supporting the channel. Obviously, we did just have a big content dump on YouTube. So there's a crazy number of YouTube videos all going out over a few days just because we were backed up. And we said, well, we're never going to catch up on these videos. So we've dumped a ton of coaching videos, ladder games, bunch of other things from different streams that are all going up in a few days. And then we'll get back to the normal YouTube schedule. Hopefully you guys enjoy the extra content. I believe you can type hashtag... If you search hashtag pig as searches my videos, I think Helix said. Let me double check. I think he said something like this the other day. There's a hashtag something. Let's see. Whoa. Did he? I think he said something about that. Let me just check. I think he said something up. Anyways, I don't understand really how YouTube works, but hopefully you guys have been enjoying those videos, and I'll keep getting into more and more of those. I have got a new PC set up at the moment. Well, it's my old gaming PC. It's taken over as the streaming PC. We're still tweaking settings and stuff. So I am going to try some different encoding settings tomorrow and compare it to today's stream. But yeah, hopefully we can see how it goes. Good shit. Good shit. It's awesome. Thanks for hanging, guys. Hopefully that helps some of you dealing with mech players and mapping out the options. Yeah, catch you guys. It's meant to do an outro for YouTube. Didn't really end up doing one.